Hey everyone, and thanks for joining another episode of Tabs, where we're talking about business strategy. And today I have Vince with me, and we are talking all about Google Analytics 4. It's something that I've got a lot of questions on with clients. What is it? What is Google trying to do with us? Why do I need to transition to it? So I brought Vince in since he is an expert in this, and he can kind of share some insights on how to get started with it. But Vince, you want to start with doing a quick introduction?
Yeah, my name is Vince Rose. I run a consultancy called Verdis Digital Solutions, and we focus on the MarTech side of things. So you have marketers, and then you have the technology that supports that. So things like GA4, HubSpot, Salesforce, marketing automation, that kind of thing. So we bring in the tech side and help people get that set up and running.
Awesome, thank you. So people are probably used to the Universal Analytics, which was kind of the previous version that ran for 10 plus years, I think, without any major software updates.
Right.
But if you have that now, you've probably been getting emails about Google Analytics 4. So do you want to quick explain what Google Analytics 4 is and what the difference is between that and Universal Analytics?
Sure. Google Analytics 4 GA4 is the new platform that Google has rolled out. It will be sunsetting Universal Analytics starting July 1 of 2023, so next year. There's, of course, some trepidation about moving to the new platform that a lot of people have. Partially, that's because the interface is different. They also got rid of some things, but it's really a good thing in the long run. It's the behaviors that you'll see are more event driven by the users. You can track people across domains, whereas before in Universal Analytics you had to set things up to track people across domains, and that just comes with GA4. It's certain data streams, but it's really easy to do. You can also track people across not only your website or multiple websites, but also with iOS and Android applications. So if somebody is interacting with your site, and then they launch an application of yours and they buy something or they add it to their cart and then they come back to their desktop browser from their phone, it tracks that whole interaction so you can see what the person is doing. Of course, it's anonymized, but that's the big feature that it's got is that you can track people across different platforms, which knowing how people use the internet today is really important because they do flip between the desktop computer, their laptop, and then their phone or tablet, and then go back and forth. So you can really track all the touch points that someone may be using and interacting with your company online. There's a few other new things that come along with it as well. There's some default interaction tracking, like it's now integrated with YouTube, so you can see how long somebody has watched a video, where they stopped, where they started again, or if they finished it. You can also track file downloads, which was something that you had to do before. You had to set that up. That's now a tracked event by default. So say you want to track all of your PDFs or something like that, that's already built in. You don't have to go in and create events for each PDF. And also tracking a PDF click was really tough in Universal Analytics. So that's really helpful if you have, say, data sheets or something like that, or a white paper. You can track that now through GA4. There's some better user segmentation as well. This is one of the really cool features, I think, is you can tell what really engaged users are doing versus unengaged users, which you cannot do in Universal Analytics. So if you have content that's performing really well, you can understand that those people who are engaging with that content are then moving on and then, say, making a purchase, or they watch a video and then, they go and do something, or they come back to the site again, or they download your app from the store. Like, you can start to track all of those interactions, which you could not do with Universal Analytics before. So it really is slick how you can see, the whole user journey that somebody's going through. Some of the other features are if you, say, are using Google Ads, which a lot of people do to drive their traffic, that's now also more tightly integrated with GA4. versus universal analytics. So you can really see how those ads are performing, and draw that line to behaviors on your website or websites. You can get some of the data out of there too, like cost per click, and get some of that demographic data like built right into analytics. So it makes it a much you can make better decisions about your ad spend based on not only how the clicks are inside Google Ads, but also how those clicks are turning into behaviors on the website and getting people to do stuff. So then you can adjust based on more data points, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, that makes sense. And from my limited understanding, kind of reading through the documentation, it sounds like it's a fundamental change in the tracking code. So you kind of hinted at too, where previously universal analytics was more looking at sessions and trying to track individual sessions and maybe kind of tying it back to user, where
Mhm.
Google Analytics 4 is event-based tracking and then has multiple different ways that ties back to a single user. So like you said, you can have a better understanding of like this user came through this channel the first time on this device. And then, a good example might be like maybe they see like an ad, like you're saying, on a mobile phone, a mobile device, and then they don't purchase on their mobile device. They actually go to their desktop 2 days later and then see it that way. And it does a better job connecting that way. Is that kind of what it's like?
Yeah. Although you may not necessarily see the person's name, you'll
Sure.
be
Yeah.
able to see the behavior. Like this is the kind of person who might fill your ideal client profile or not, and you can see what their behavior is. So you can start to adjust things much quicker because you're getting that data between the two different systems and seeing what they're doing. So you can push
Yeah.
it one way or the other, either get more people engaged or shift your spending over to something that's working really well, and step on the gas and make it happen faster. So
Yeah, that makes sense.
yeah, for sure. For
So
sure.
what does that transition look like from Universal Analytics to Google Analytics 4?
Yeah. So there are some key differences between the two. There's a few factors that'll help you, understand before you get started how big a, lift it's going to be to do the migration. First of all, it's mandatory, so you're going to have to do it anyway. But there's a few questions that you can get into that'll help you understand how much of a lift it's going to be. So first of all, is the complexity of your current universal analytics setup. Some people have small conversion goals set up in universal analytics, and that's fairly easy to move over to GA4. So that won't take much effort. But if you have a lot going on in universal analytics, of course, there's a couple of things you can do. You can audit to make sure you need all of that stuff and whittle down how much you're going to migrate. But you can also then say, we got to move it all. It's going to be a big job. We better get started there. No other factors, maybe if you're using a CMS or an e-commerce platform, a lot of those platforms have already either plugins or extensions built in that will help you migrate. Like if you're using e-commerce or you've got a WooCommerce store, I'm sorry, you will be able to install a plugin and it will change up the names and the attributes that Google Analytics 4 will be tracking. That's one of the things that if you're not using that or using a platform like Shopify that only reports some of the data, you may need a developer to help you with to set up the new names, because there are changes from Universal Analytics to GA4's naming conventions for the different attributes. So that's one of the reasons you may need a developer to help you out there. Those are really the big ones. If you're using Google Tag Manager, that's really helpful because you can just do it all in one interface. You can set those new attributes and names up. But if you're not using Google Tag Manager, this may be an opportunity for you to get it installed, because then you can add those tags and triggers inside of Google Tag Manager without then having to engage a developer to make the changes for you. So there's some some things that you can do pretty easily, and other things are dependent on the technology that you may need a developer for. It kind of varies between the different setups, but it could be small if you're not doing a lot, or it could be a lot if you've been using Universal Analytics pretty heavily. Yeah, and then of course some things are now baked into it, so you may not have to do quite as much as you imagine.
No, that makes sense. And just to confirm too, you can run both at the same time too, right? You can have the universal
Yes.
analytics code. It's a separate code base, right? So you could have that running at the same time as running analytics 4.
Yeah, so you can have Universal Analytics and still run your reports and collect data. Again, the Google Analytics, or sorry, Universal Analytics will stop July 1st of 2023. So you won't be collecting any more data after that, but you can still continue to collect data with Universal Analytics while you're setting up GA4 and tweaking GA4.
Okay.
There is an advantage to doing that. Uh, when somebody implements GA4, I've done quite a few of these migrations, there's typically a drop in numbers because the way an interaction gets measured is different in GA4. So you may say have 1,000 page views under Universal Analytics and then have 800 page views with GA4. And people may panic when they first see that, but it's actually better data under GA4. But if you run them in parallel, you can get an idea of like, in October of 2022, this was 1,000 page views, and that's the same as 800 page views in October for GA4. So as you're looking at your historical data, you can say, okay, this ratio fits to about what we saw previously, and maybe take some of the guesswork out of what's happening, and consider, oh, it's the reporting system that's changed. It's not
Yeah.
that we're doing anything different that's causing that drop in traffic. It's actually because the data is better.
Yeah, no, I saw that in documentation too, that they mentioned that Google Analytics 4 does a better job of deduping some visits. So you might see a reduction in visits, but like you said, it's actually probably more accurate as far as like the number of people coming. And I know they mentioned like they do machine learning in the background to make it happen, but I mean, it probably is some actual, intelligent automation in the background happening there too. So that's a good
Yeah.
point. So why should people make that transition from Google Analytics Universal to Google Analytics 4? Because I think a lot of people are comfortable with their universal setup. They have all their reports configured. They know where to find all their data. So why should they, and you kind of hinted at it already, but why should they make that change to the new version?
Well, first of all, it's mandatory. Google is going to be stop using Universal Analytics to collect data on July 1st of 2023. And then any reports that are inside of Universal Analytics will only be available until January 1st of 2024. After that, they'll be inaccessible. So you should make the transition sooner rather than later, because it may take some time to do, and you don't want to get caught having a gap in your data where it stopped collecting Universal Analytics and you rolled out GA4. I mean, you can also run them in parallel, so you can catch any bugs that may need to happen or may need to be fixed or taken care of. Build out your reports so that you're sure you have the data that's being tracked in GA4 before Universal Analytics stops reporting. If you run them in parallel, like I said, you can see what a drop looks like, because almost universally, it takes some time to see how Universal Analytics matches up with GA4, so you're not wondering if you made a mistake or if it's something wrong with what you're doing versus the reporting system there. You can also start to build out some of your other events and things that may need to get changed, event names, attribute changes that come with moving to GA4, and make sure that you have all that data before you're cut off. So that's really the important thing, is that you're going to get cut off. People should transition. And the other thing is that your data, you mentioned things being moved and it feeling a little daunting. Like, almost everything is now in GA4. It just is in a different place underneath the report. So in Universal Analytics, they had reports as part of the navigation on the left, and now it's underneath reports that you have to click into to find it. So when you first log in, you're like, where is everything?
Yep.
There. It's just hidden in the navigation.
Yeah, that was kind of my experience as well. So I was definitely dragging my feet to make that switch because I'd already had everything set up in Universal Analytics. And of course, I set up a property on it and checked it out. I'm like, I can't find the reports I'm looking for. I'm not going to mess with this. And then, like, as you said, there is that fear of data continuity if I don't just start using it and getting comfortable with it. And of course, like, I'm working with some clients that might have to pop in and look at their websites and stuff too. So that was part of that, like, kind of nudge to make it happen. But now that I've done it and dug a little deeper, I have found them able to find some of those reports in a pretty effective way. And actually, like, the more I play around with it, the more I realize it's probably even more robust data and I can do more with it. But it's just not the interface I'm used to. But that's kind of like Google 101 is to have them change their user interface on you every couple months anyhow. So, which I guess ties really good to my next question. So, what should people do or where should they go to learn more about Analytics 4 and kind of get themselves started on that process?
Yeah, I think there, of course, Google has documentation. They have documentation on how to migrate from Universal Analytics to GA4. So that's helpful. It's pretty straightforward. They've done a good job of massaging that information into a more usable format over the past couple of years because GA4 has been out for a while. It's just been in beta. There's also a section of that that's for specifically training and support resources. So they have links to online tutorials, online classes that you can take, more documentation that you can read. And so that's really helpful. It's about 10 different links that you can go to, and it's part of their guide. There's also a gentleman who runs an account called Analytics Media on YouTube, and he has a lot of really great introductory and easy to follow tutorials online. Of course, he's got a full in-depth class, but his free tutorials online are really great for learning it. And then, there's plenty of YouTube out there too for people to find stuff. But Analytics Mini is probably the best one I found.
Okay, cool. I'll link those courses you mentioned or Google Analytics documentation from Google you mentioned, as well as that YouTube channel in the blog article of this video too, so people can check that out for more information. So Vince is very helpful. Any closing thoughts that you want to share with the audience related to Google Analytics 4 or that transition from Universal to Analytics?
Yeah, almost 100% of my clients that I've worked with have a moment of feeling overwhelmed by GA4. It's going to take a little bit of effort to move over for most people, unless you're just starting brand new. But in the end, the data is going to be better. You'll be able to make decisions faster because of the different integrations with the systems. You will have to do less setup in the future because they have more events tracked. It's got other features like you can debug when you're setting it up. So you don't have to, using what they call debug view, you don't have to actually muddy your real analytics data with setup data, which has been really great. If you're in there working on a page and you hit it 100 times, that data using the debug view is not part of your actual data and going to skew what you're looking at and your decisions that you're going to make, which is really helpful. You have more control over your privacy data. Google Analytics 4 has features built in for GDPR. So if you're concerned about those regulations, those privacy regulations, you have more control over how the data is stored in Google systems and the ability to remove that data as the regulations change or more regions adopt those, like countries or states adopt those. You make better choices about your ad spend. There's a whole long list of reasons to move from Universal Analytics to GA4. And, you're not alone with right now if you're feeling overwhelmed by it, but in the end, it really will be a great move. The more I work with it and the more clients work with it, the more they like it. but everybody went through that first blush looking at it and going like, oh my goodness, I don't know how I'm going to do this.
Yeah,
So,
no, I can definitely relate to that feeling of like the fuck, another new thing I have to learn about Google thing too in the process.
yeah,
But what you're
yeah.
saying is people should do it. That sounds like the resounding
But
answer
yeah,
to this
you're going to
process.
have to, but take a deep breath and you'll be okay.
Yeah,
But yeah, you'll be
cool.
better in the evening.
Well, I really appreciate you joining today. It was very helpful information. Where should people find out more about you and your consulting practice?
Yeah, so the website for my consultancy is Verdis Martech, VERDISMARTECH.com. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm also on Twitter at Martech Vince, and then they can just email me too. I'm happy to answer some questions. Vincent@verdismartech.com. So, I'm
Awesome.
always happy to talk. So just let me know if you got any questions.
Sounds good. Awesome. Thanks, Vince.
All right. Thanks, James.